Check out all my baits that I make from start to finish, from the master mold all the way to the finished product swimming in the water. The initial demo to when it's in the water catching fish. What's up everyone, how are you? This is a follow-up video on how I did a one-piece mold for the one-piece baits to avoid having to do a two-piece mold. But I'm here to show you how that same molding process works for two-piece baits. So if you didn't watch the initial molding process and how I had the master mold in here sticking straight and how I did it all, please just review that video. It's up here in the iCard here somewhere, and it's also down in the description below. But this is a follow-up to that video, so the other video wasn't insanely long. I've shown you how to do a two-piece. This is my 8-inch shad. It actually works very, very well. And all my baits that I make are out of one-piece molds that are much less labor intensive. You don't have to wait near as long for all of it to cure. It's much simpler to put in there. There's much less cleanup, much less distortion to the overall clone, the resin clone. Just overall, so whether trying to do this whole bait making thing as a profession, or you are simply like myself, somebody who's addicted to fishing who doesn't want to spend hundreds of dollars buying somebody else's swim baits you can make it yourself, this is going to be a good and useful thing for you. Using the same process we did before, but for a two-piece deal. And how you cut it and how you measure it out makes all the difference. Check this out. Here I have the front piece and the back piece, the head and the tail. And we're going to try and cut it only about 1/4 somewhere a little bit farther, maybe into 1/3 of the actual mold, leaving the rest of it uncut. So there's no two-piece deal here. There's no overlap, there's no distortion, there's no cleaning up, there's less sanding, there's very, very slow cleanup on the top if you do everything right. So we're just making sure we have the front marked, and we're cutting a line because I'm guessing right where I need to cut it before the head dips down too much is right about there. And we're gonna end up having to cut down fairly far down that end. So we're looking at about 1/3 of the mold we'll actually have a cut in. So after we get it out of the foam board here, we'll get to work. Use a sharp X-Acto knife, and as you cut, spread with your fingers. That way you don't get a bunch of distortion and you get a straight line. Okay, we should be able to get this thing out now. There we go. There is the master. Here I'm cutting slight variations, like triangular cuts for air bleed outs, because as we pour in the resin, specifically distorted resin with micro balloons, the resin thickens. It's harder for air to get out, and so we're particularly making little cuts like that, just little holes throughout the top that bleed out air, and it actually works out very well. Okay, now here you can see I made a zigzag line and a cut, and right there where it zigzags is right around the edge of the tail. The tail is split so you can stick a rubber tail in it, like the tail end. And in order for that to actually cure in a one-piece mold, you have to cut a zigzag line, and one piece of the mold has to flap over the other side of the tail. So you'll see that right now that little zigzag is because that part's covering the entire tail. And because this is high strength 3 Luminlite silicone mold, it's super stretchy, so I'll be able to pull that over off the tail as I pull the resin clone out. But right now we're being very, very careful, checking where they're cutting so we don't miss it. You can see right there the side of the bait, and you see where the tail ends, but you can see the majority of the silicone on the left side is covering the tail, and that's what we want. Right on the edge so we can pull it right off. And you'll have the correct groove slotted right in there. Right now we're cutting a little bit more than I wanted to, but that's because the part we're doing is tapering so thin. The mold is fairly thick, and this is just what we're going to have to do in order to get it out. But we're only cutting as much as we possibly can. That way we can do it. This is the master mold, and it's made out of Sculpey, and so it's not the strongest, and so that part of the tail did come off in the master mold, but it does not in the finished product. Just want to make that very clear. See right here where the joints are in the very front where it triangles out, and you'll see it later. That's crucial for non-distortion. You don't want distortion in that area. And right here you can see where the flap is that covers the one side of the tail, and you still have that groove that makes the actual groove in the tail where you can slot the tail in once you fabricate your own rubber tails. And that's very important. When we put this together and it closes together, it makes a perfect mold. There's very, very little distortion that you have to clean up. The back will have much more distortion than the front. The front's much easier to do because of the cuts and all that stuff, but we're good there. We just slided the weights in there. I put all my weights on fishing line in line, and they just go right there and center perfect. We centered the bait earlier. If you watched the earlier molding video to get it to this point, and I don't have to use any fancy harnesses. I just literally put weights in and they slot in, and I control it with fishing line, and that's it. That's all we do. And as in the part 1 of this video, we're using just baling wire. We're bending it to fit. If you have problems with your fishing line moving around, you can just put a little screw on the side of the mold and tie your fishing line onto it so your weights sit perfectly. And sometimes I have that problem with the front piece because the front piece slants up, you know, the way as the head kind of tapers in from the swim bait. After your weights are set and you have enough baling wire to crunch the mold together to where you're not going to get any bleed outs from the resin going in, you're ready to pour. Make sure you are pouring your resin on a like clean removable surface somewhere. I'm using this piece of like HDP plastic. I don't know, I've had this piece of plastic forever and it's utterly useless, but it serves as a good board to pour on. We are using 2-part high strength casting resin here. I have the link in the bottom if you guys want to try it out. It's on my Amazon store. This is really all I use. It's the most cost effective, and it's very, very strong. Like when you make your bait out of solid resin and it accidentally hits the side of a rock or something, it's not going to break. I mean, it's not going to explode like an injection molded bait. That's one of the other big advantages to pouring your own stuff. So once we mix this, I'm layering this, by the way, just so you see this. I'm layering a full resin for parts of it with no distortion to kind of even out my weight along with my added weights. And then I do the rest of it with micro balloon 50-50 split. Now, however you split the resin or however you distort the resin, that's contingent on what your swim bait looks like and how long it is, how fat it is. I mean, a lot of things go in here, but this is what I'm doing. But you can see me pour this in here. I'm pouring it right there where you kind of have the funnel hole. And I don't have to worry about air being trapped in here for the moment. But I'm shaking it up, pouring it again, and these are in exact measuring cups. You need to have an exact 50-50 split or else the resin will not cure right. It will be a distorted color, which will not be good. And so that's why you see me being a little finicky. Right now we're pouring it into micro balloons. I have a 50-50 split, so it's 50% resin, 50% micro balloons, which distort the density a lot. They make the bait a lot lighter than it is. And so now we have kind of a multi-layer of the swim bait. We're going a little bit more in depth on just how to mold this because I haven't done a mold specific video, but just to give you a brief taste of what the next video is going to be, it's going to be specifically about the type of resin and what micro balloons are. I'll go super in depth about it, but I just want to give you a preview of what the next videos to come and how I really pour this mold. I want to show you because once you do this and you mix it with micro balloons, the resin is a lot thicker, so being able to hold it open with your finger like this is pretty crucial without your mold falling apart because it's 2-piece. So I can do this because it's 1-piece. I can hold it open because it's pinned with a wire on one side, and so I can watch it, let the air bleed out. And then when I feel it's good, I can just close it like that right there. That mold's done. I mean, the top bleed out, that'll break off, and it's ready to go. And I'm going to do the same with this side. Now comes the fun part. We get to rip it out. So part of the bait is gonna have, you know, excess resin distortion because that's where we cut. But the parts of the bait that are crucial, right there in the front piece, no distortion. And that's where you need to have the joints, and that's where everything needs to be perfect. And nothing can be really wrong with that, or your swim bait has problems. So the front there is perfect. And then we look right where we pulled out the tail. The tail's perfect. The slot in the tail is perfect. And look, I just peeled all that distortion off with my hands. That's how little we had. I literally just cleaned up that bait in like 1 second. And we do the same with the front. Pull the front out. All the top is there. You can see where the bleed outs were, or the top 3, and I cut the funnels very short so I can just pull it off with my hand. I don't have to use any tools. I don't have to use any sanding deals. Really, really, really light sanding at best at the very, very tops of the lures. But they come out perfect. It fits like a T. I love it. Check out the finished product after this thing is painted in the water.